I feel like every 2 seconds I get a new alert on my phone that Ben Simmons will not be here. Do you think that it is becoming increasingly obvious? You've been around this team a lot, and you may have sources on this or have heard stuff, but is it becoming increasingly obvious that Ben Simmons will be moved?
I still think it's going to come down to what they get. I don't think. I mean, obviously, we've all seen some of these reports out there. That Toronto is appearing to be a team that's very interested in Ben Simmons. But if the you saw the reported offer that the Sixers wanted from them, and it was a lot. And I think that's the deal. Like, if you want if you're not giving the Sixers Dame Lillard or Bradley Beal or someone in that ilk, someone of that ilk, you're not getting Ben Simmons unless you blow them away with an offer. So I don't think it's as simple as they're ready to move on and they want to trade him and they need to trade him. I think it's sure he's out there, he's available. They're clearly listening and they're clearly talking to plenty of people about him. But I still think it boils down to they're going to have to get extremely good value. And I think all the rumors and everything you're seeing, that has been the most consistent thing, is that they are not going to trade him unless they are getting all-star talent in return.
Woj just 1 minute ago tweeting that the Sixers continue to canvass the league for Ben Simmons trades, armed with a steep asking price. Simmons and his agent, Clutch CEO Rich Paul, are in step with a move elsewhere. Draft night is always ideal vehicle for a deal, but talks could continue into the summer. Now, when you hear that the agent is now, they're in step with a move elsewhere, is that the next step of saying, hey, maybe it's a better for everybody if we just move on?
I think it's agent, and with all due respect to Rich Paul, is very good at what he does. I think it's agent speak to basically say, oh, yeah, you're going to trade me? Yeah, we're totally on board with that. I mean, that's just to help the players' value, to help the players standing in the league. Because, look, the reality is Ben Simmons' value right now and his stature around the league is the lowest it has been ever since he's been a rookie in this league. He's been the brunt of jokes in regular in local and national media, some fair, some pretty, maybe a little bit borderline out of bounds. But the reality is he's not viewed in a lot of circles the way he once was. So if you're Rich Paul and you're Ben Simmons and you're his camp, you don't want to make it look like, oh, well, the Sixers are getting rid of me. You want to make it look like, oh, yeah, we're totally on board. A fresh start is good for the Sixers and it's great for us. So to me, that's what that is. That's agent speak. And I don't think that influences anything either way. And the other thing, because I didn't see that from Woj, so thank you for letting me know.
Just 1 minute ago, man. I can't expect you to do two things at one time.
But the way he phrased that to say it could go into the summer, because I think if you're Daryl Morey, why are you going to pull the trigger on a sub-optimal value package when Dame Lillard's future seems very rocky? Bradley Beal's future seems pretty rocky. Why are you going to make a deal with Toronto and not get a player like one of those guys when, you know what I mean? Like, why would you accept that lower value when you can wait, have a little patience? Maybe the draft night, maybe that does play out. But if it doesn't, what does it hurt to wait? To me, that's the big thing. Is I am all about patience. I think that's the way to go, because you don't want to pull the trigger on a trade with a team like Toronto, and then a month later, Bradley Beal or Dame Lillard are demanding out of their respective teams.
What do you make of, yes, those moves? Toronto, it's being reported Toronto, Miami, and who's the other Eastern Conference team? Wizards. They're interested. Do you think Daryl Morey is interested in trading in the conference?
To me, it doesn't matter. You get value where you get value. I don't think you necessarily look at it like that. Now, maybe when you're talking about the higher, are they going to make a deal with the Bucks? Probably not. Are they going to make a deal with the Nets? Probably not. The Celtics, like some of those teams, maybe not. You don't make a big deal with those. But like a team like the Wizards, if the Wizards are trading Bradley Beal, they're blowing things up. So you're not worried about them, challenging you, at least not in the near future. Now, maybe it comes back to bite you 6 years from now and Ben Simmons becomes the player many expected him to be. But if I'm Daryl Morey, I'd have zero hesitation about dealing with the Raptors or the Wizards at this point. If it's a move that is going to make you better, if it's a move that has a chance to make you a title contender right now, I don't think you can worry about what it's going to do for the other team. You have to worry about yourself. If it makes you better, you pull the trigger. You can't be worried about that.
Okay. Obviously, if it's Washington, Beal. Well, Toronto, there was a lot of stuff the last couple days about Toronto. The number 4 pick. I think Van Vliet's name is mentioned in there. Does that deal interest you, Toronto?
It doesn't not interest me, I guess is the best way to put it. Because I guess it depends on what you view with that number 4 pick. Like, if you think you could turn that number 4 pick eventually, I mean, they're going to have to draft a player if they do trade for him. But if you think you could possibly move that player, like if you remember years ago when LeBron went to the Cavs and they drafted Wiggins, number 1 overall, and they eventually moved Wiggins for Kevin Love. Something like that is possible. So maybe if you do a trade like that with Toronto, you have that number 4 pick, whether it's a Jalen Suggs or a Jonathan Kuminga or one of those kind of guys, you have a team that might be interested in one of those guys that you could trade. Like, would Washington be interested perhaps in a Jonathan Kuminga or a Jalen Suggs if they're moving on for Bradley Beal? Sure. Why wouldn't they be? So if that's the end game, it appeals to me a little bit. A guy like Van Vliet, I think, would be a tremendous fit here. A guy who can create off the dribble, a guy who can hit outside shots, who's a tough-minded player, tough-nosed player. He'd certainly help them here. But to me, I still go back to that. I'm holding out. If that's the best thing which it might not be the best thing to get, but if that's the best thing I can get on draft night, I'd probably pass. I'd probably hold out and hope I can get a hold of one of those other guys that I mentioned.
What's the connection with Miami?
I see absolutely none. Makes zero sense to me. Mike, in any capacity, it makes no sense. I do think that narrative, that rhetoric of, Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons not liking each other, I think that's overblown. I don't even look at it like that. I look at it as, okay, so if you're trading him to Miami and the goal is to keep Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, that gives you 3 guys in your starting lineup that don't take threes. Because Jimmy doesn't take threes and he doesn't do it at a high clip. Bam Adebayo also does not. And you're going to add Ben Simmons to that mix. So I don't really get that. I don't know how you can make it work contractually without including Jimmy Butler, which, again, makes little sense. Why would the Heat move Jimmy Butler right now? And then lastly, I just don't how would think about Ben Simmons and his personality. And this isn't a knock on Ben Simmons, but do you really think Ben Simmons would be all about that whole Heat culture thing? Like, I don't see him being a fit there. Like, I don't see it on the court. I don't see it off the court. I don't see it financially. It makes zero sense. And I saw even Sam Amick kind of pump the brakes on that a little bit and kind of softened on that because I do not see a fit with the Miami Heat at all.
Yeah, that one's interesting. Obviously the Portland thing seems to be you're just kind of waiting, right? You're playing the waiting game with them. So that's why, to me, hearing that, it's it's becoming more and more possible. The 3 teams that are mentioned there. Now, we know other teams have some interest that we've heard, but those teams, Indiana, Minnesota, I think we've all kind of come to terms with whatever they're offering. The Sixers aren't going to, Sacramento, that stuff, that doesn't seem to be something that they're going to be interested. Like, there's not a deal that makes sense for the magnitude of Ben Simmons with those mid-level teams.
No, not unless you're including a third team. That's the only way you're going to do that because that's great that the Minnesota Timberwolves would like to have Ben Simmons, but I don't see any player on that other than maybe Anthony Edwards, who was the number 1 overall pick last year. But first of all, I don't know why Minnesota would do it. Second of all, He's very young and it probably doesn't fit the timeline. Any of those teams, I don't see where the trade fits. Now, if we're circling back, to me, the two teams that I'm keeping the biggest eye on, Toronto, just because there's just been so much smoke around Toronto, and Washington, just because there's so much smoke right now around Bradley Beal and the rumors around him. Now, Mike, let me throw this scenario out there that I don't have any sources on this. I'm not reporting anything, but just the idea of it. What if you got in a 3-team trade with Toronto, with the Wizards, where you end up with Bradley Beal and you sign and trade for Kyle Lowry? That is not an impossible scenario to happen. And imagine a backcourt of Kyle Lowry and Bradley Beal to play with Ben Simmons. It doesn't even matter who the other two guys on the court are if you have those three guys. So to me, knowing Daryl Morey's history and what he's done and the things he's done over the years, you cannot rule any of this. There might be a 4-team trade where maybe you get the Lakers involved and Westbrook goes over to the Lakers. Like, who knows with this guy? Like, it's like Doctor Strange in the Marvel universe. Like, this guy has every like a million scenarios already played out in his head about what could happen, about where it could happen. So I think if you're a Sixers fan, I don't think you should worry that Daryl Morey is not going to get proper value for Ben Simmons, because I believe that he will, and I think that's why the process has kind of been dragged out a little bit and why it is taking a little longer than maybe some people would like.
Yeah. What do you make of the Lowry stuff?
It's interesting because I know with the sign and trade, the hard cap makes that a tricky situation. We don't have enough time to go over the CBA and all that and what it means.
Right.
But
like,
basically,
that's what
it
they
means
did to just explain to the listeners. They just can't go out and sign Kyle Lowry.
No, not at all. Like, it has to be a sign and trade. And then if it's a sign and trade, your hard cap, which basically means you kind of can't do anything else. Like, you're done. Like, that's it. And it would make it really hard to make trades in the future. It would just put them in a really tough spot. Now, with that said, could you perhaps move? I don't know. If you move Ben Simmons and you don't take back as much money wise, could that clear some space? If you do a sign and trade with Ben Simmons and then possibly also move Tobias Harris, could that clear? Like, you'd almost have to move money one way or another. You have 3 max contracts. So you'd almost have to move money in order to make it work. If you were able to get Kyle Lowry at the trade deadline, that would have made it a lot easier, and that would have fit into the cap a lot nicer because you already would have had his bird rights, and you would have had a much easier time sliding him in. But with the sign and trade, it makes it really complicated and really tricky. So while it's certainly not impossible, but in order to do that, you almost have to move both Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris in order to kind of make that work so you're not completely hamstringing yourself.
Any NBA draft thought? I know the Sixers at 28 are not, but there have been various reports that people feel that they will not pick and that they will do something with that pick to try to get better.
It would not surprise me to move that pick. I mean, that seems to be, again, a lot of smoke around that. I've seen 3 different people that I trust report that. I know Tom Moore just wrote an interesting piece where he suggested the idea of Cam Reddish the 28th pick plus for Cam Reddish, because the Hawks are in a tough spot because they can't sign everyone, and they have a lot of guys who are going to be owed a lot of money in the upcoming years. Cam Reddish would intrigue the hell out of me as a guy who I think is already a pretty good defensive player and has some offensive upside. So I would be intrigued by that. And I think he's a guy that can help you now, and if you keep him, could possibly develop into more. You can kind of get a feel for that. Other than that, I mean, it would make sense to trade for veteran help of some kind. If they don't, there are some players I really like around that 28 range. I know Trey Mann has been a guy from Florida that a lot of people have talked about. Kind of reminds me of D'Angelo Russell a little bit. So the idea of a D'Angelo Russell that you can bring off the bench and not have to pay a max contract to, that could be a player that could be very useful. Bones Highland from VCU is very intriguing to me. He's a tough kid. He is audacious. He is not afraid to shoot it from anywhere. I think the Sixers could use some more of that. A guy like Miles McBride from West Virginia. I mean, there are guys that I think –
I like that.
There are guys who I think could intrigue them at 28 if they hang on to the pick. But if they can get veteran help or a veteran player, I think that's the right move, because you're not developing guys. You're trying to win right now. And so I think if you can get a guy that can help you, you got to pull the trigger on it.
At Paul Hudrick, the Sixers draft tomorrow night. Obviously, Ben Simmons. We've got the Summer League schedule. That has been released. There is a lot of hoops happening. We'll keep you up to date. At Paul Hudrick, follow him on Twitter. And he was kind enough to join us under short notice today. Thank you, Paul.
You got it, Mike.